But I like what you were saying, Topuria versus Oliveira. Oh, very.
Your first introduction at 55, kind of the,
Oliveira
king
so
of
tall
and dangerous.
So dangerous everywhere, dangerous striking, huge reach.
Former UFC lightweight champion Charles Oliveira is training hard to reclaim his belt in his upcoming title fight against Ilia Topuria. Confident in his ability to finish Topuria, Oliveira acknowledges the challenge but stands firm in his skills, emphasizing that his accomplishments speak for themselves, and he has nothing to prove. He made it clear that he's aiming for a decisive victory, and is fully prepared to stop Topuria.
Ilia Topuria and Ilia Topuria, the fighter. How do you feel about just the overall fight?
É uma grande luta. Ele é um grande lutador, mas eu não preciso falar mais nada pra ninguém. Quem eu sou, que eu já fiz, aí fazendo grande pequeno. Só chegou uma oportunidade gigantesca. Vou nocar esse cara. He's gonna knock this guy out.
On the other hand, Ilia Topuria is also prepared for all kinds of challenges, and warned Oliveira that he will have to pay the price for what Islam Makhachev did. Topuria isn't intimidated by Charles Oliveira's submission record, and has his sights firmly set on the title. Heavyweight champion John Jones has also backed Topuria, commenting on his rise by saying, "Only time will show how Topuria handles success." Jones noted that while winning a UFC title is difficult, staying champion is even harder due to the pressure, fame, money, and distractions, adding that few fighters can sustain it long-term. He wished Topuria well, highlighting his strong support system and expressing hope that he'll make the right choices.
Misiones y la ONG, que quería someter a Agar, no sé si quieres lograr la vuelta por someterlo.
No sé, con Oliveira la verdad que lo que sea menos doloroso para mí, solo que haré para que...
However, Daniel Cormier questioned why Charles Oliveira is being written off despite his strong reputation, expressing surprise that many no longer see him as a serious threat. Chael Sonnen agreed, referring to Oliveira as the Forsaken One, and using an example to support his point. Sonnen compared Ilia Topuria to Arman Tsarukyan, noting that Tsarukyan had a very close fight with Oliveira, and was nearly finished before being saved by the bell. He emphasized that Oliveira and Tsarukyan are similar athletically, implying that Topuria faces a tough challenge when stepping into the cage with Oliveira.
Ilia too, like, do you think anybody has an answer for that guy?
I think time will tell. One thing that I know from experience, just being in the sport for so long, that it's difficult to win the belt. It's more difficult to live the lifestyle of a UFC champion, be in the UFC. The fame, the press, the money, and the girls, and the alcohol, all of it doubles down on you. Very few people can handle it. So yeah, I actually do wish there was all the support in the world. It's a great family, it's a great fight team, friends.
Islam too.
I think he's gonna do the right thing. We'll see. It's always gonna be a matter of time when it comes to people become champions.
Meanwhile, Arman Tsarukyan says he's ready to step in as a backup for the upcoming lightweight fight between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira. After a grappling match in Moscow, he explained that he needs to seize opportunities now, referencing a past injury that was misdiagnosed. Tsarukyan stated that he's focused on getting back on track and is willing to do whatever the UFC asks of him.
I feel like Charles doesn't have a chance. Like Charles Oliveira we're talking about. Why are people just writing him off?
Yeah, Charles really is kind of the forsaken one here. I mean, let me just give you a great example, which would be Tsarukyan. If I told you that Ilia was going to fight Tsarukyan, I think you'd go, wow, that's a close fight. Well, if I can play that game with you and just remind you that Tsarukyan fought Charles, and it was, wow, a super close fight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the fact that they thought that, when the fight was over, it was a split decision when they weren't sure what was going to happen. Charles was choking him out, and it was kind of a saved by the bell moment. Charles and Sarukian are very interchangeable in terms of their athleticism. And I think if you think about it that way, you realize that Topuria really is stepping into
On the other
some
hand,
deep...
speaking about the Aaiye versus Charles fight, Josh Thompson said Ilia Topuria faces a tough challenge moving up to fight Charles Oliveira, who is tall, lanky, and one of the UFC's best submission artists. He noted that while many expect Topuria to knock Oliveira out, he acknowledged Oliveira's resilience. Thompson explained that Oliveira often gets hurt or wobbled, but manages to come back and win, comparing his toughness to that of Eddie Alvarez.
Страховать не знаю, но однозначно, если они предложат, я буду... Да, я готов, буду готов. Я сейчас улетаю в Америку и буду там находиться, если вернуться, если UFC мне скажет, что...
UFC welterweight fighter Michael Chiesa finds it hard to pick against Ilia Topuria in his fight against Charles Oliveira for the vacant title. Although Chiesa is a big fan of Oliveira and respects the old guard, he believes Topuria's ability to target the body will be crucial, noting that Oliveira's tall stance often leaves his body exposed, and he has been hurt by body shots before. Chiesa also pointed out that Topuria's background as a grappler and wrestler makes him a tough submission target, which could make it difficult for Oliveira, the UFC's greatest submission specialist, to finish him. Ultimately, Chiesa expects Topuria to get the job
to do
done.
it against, you're going up in weight, and you're fighting former champion Charles Oliveira, who is tall, long, and lanky, and extremely good on the ground. One of the best, if not the best, in the UFC in terms of submissions. So this is, and it's so funny because when the fight was announced, I'd seen everyone say, man, it was going to knock him out, da-da-da. But as now, in the last probably 3 or 4 days, I've seen a ton of people kind of not retracting what they said, but just basically saying, yeah, Charles, though, I've seen him, he gets dropped or gets wobbled in every fight, and then he comes back and wins. And I'm like, yeah, he has that Eddie Alvarez kind of effect, where he gets hurt, he gets stunned, and then he comes back and submits you, or he comes back and he wins 3 or 4 rounds. Whatever it is.
Legend Michael Bisping also broke down the Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira fight, describing Oliveira as a dangerous, aggressive fighter who constantly moves forward with punches, knees, elbows, and relentless submission attempts. He acknowledged that this would be Topuria's first fight at lightweight, but praised his punching power, boxing pressure, and Greco-Roman wrestling. Bisping said he wouldn't be surprised if Topuria pulled off the win.
Topuria is now fighting Charles Oliveira, who's winning the vacant title now.
Man, it's really hard to pick against Ilia Topuria. I'm a big Charles Oliveira fan, especially I love, I'm always rooting for the guys from the old guard. But if I'm going to get into the X's and O's, the way Topuria is able to touch the body is something that I think it's going to play a big role in this fight. Charles likes to stand very tall. He kind of leaves that body open a little bit. We've seen him go down from body shots in the past. And people forget, or actually people don't forget, people just might not know this. The Ilia Topuria's base, in the way he came up on the regional scene, you would not think that he's this devastating puncher. He really shined as a grappler, really shined with his wrestling. And while Charles Oliveira is the all-time submission lead, the greatest ground specialist we've ever seen in the UFC, I think that it's going to be very hard for Charles to submit Ilia Topuria.
Ilia versus Charles is a dangerous matchup. Oliveira is aggressive, always moving forward with punches, knees, elbows, and looking to lock in a submission. This will be Ilia's first fight at lightweight, and with his punching power, sharp boxing, solid footwork, and Greco-Roman wrestling, it wouldn't be surprising if he pulls it off. Meanwhile, Renato Moicano believes the Oliveira versus Topuria fight is tougher than it appears. While many expect Topuria to dominate, he says Charles is incredibly tough and shouldn't be counted out. Moicano acknowledged Topuria's strength at 145 lbs, but after a recent podcast with Oliveira, he found himself liking Charles more and ultimately backed him, partly due to his Brazilian roots.
Versus Charles Du Bronx Oliveira. We know Charles, he's a dangerous, aggressive. He's going to walk forward, punches, knees, elbows. He'll lock on a submission. Ilia, this is his first fight at lightweight, and with the punching power of Ilia Topuria, the boxing that he has, footwork that he has in the Greco-Roman wrestling, it wouldn't surprise me.
UFC lightweight Mateusz Gamrot predicts that Charles Oliveira will knock out Ilia Topuria at UFC 317. While he acknowledges Topuria's power and the possibility that he could hurt Oliveira if he lands clean, Gamrot believes Oliveira's size, experience, and striking will be too much. He sees Oliveira as too big and well-rounded for a featherweight moving up, and expects the former champion to finish Topuria in their title.
On the Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria card. Charles is a big underdog. How do you see that fight going?
Man, that's a tougher matchup that a lot of people think. They think Topuria gonna run through Charles. You never count Charles Oliveira out. I think he's very tough. But Topuria is good, you know. He's 145. It's going to be a tough fight for both fighters. I don't have an opinion on that. I was leaning more to Topuria, but today I just had a podcast with Charles on my Brazilian channel. It's just very hard to not like the guy. That makes harder, you know, to pick against him. So I'm going with Charles just because he's Brazilian.
However, Daniel Cormier highlighted Ilia Topuria's greatest strength as his confidence, sharing that Josh Thompson told him Topuria simply doesn't know how to lose, a mindset that fuels his success. Cormier explained that Topuria's strong self-belief drives him to enter every fight expecting to win, which is clearly reflected in his fearless and dominant performances.
The both guys have changed like if Ilya hit Charles Oliveira head, so he can knock him down for sure. But I think Oliveira is so big for him and for all-rounder fighter, and I think Oliveira will win this fight.
UFC double champ Henry Cejudo believes the matchup stylistically favors Ilia Topuria due to his explosive power and sharp striking. He praised Topuria's ability to mix attacks to the body and head, and highlighted his track record of knocking opponents out cold. Cejudo did acknowledge that Topuria has been hurt before, referencing the Jai Herbert fight at 155 where he was dropped, but showed resilience by coming back to win by knockout.
I think of this fight stylistically. I think, okay, the explosive power and the power in the hands, and it's crazy to say that, you have to go with more of Ilia Topuria, right? Ilia Topuria goes high-low. He can go to the body. He can go up top. He's been knocking people out cold. That means Max Holloway, 2 future Hall of Famers he knocked out. None of those guys went championship rounds. We saw him one time at 155 pounds where he did get hurt against Burns. Against Jai Herbert. But he got hurt. He got dropped. But the matador in him, he came back.
Cejudo acknowledged Charles Oliveira's size and experience at lightweight, highlighting his victories over top contenders and effective double-leg takedowns. However, he warned that Oliveira's preference for close-range fighting could be risky against an inside striker like Ilia Topuria, making it a potentially unfavorable stylistic matchup. So guys, subscribe to my channel for more news and updates.